There is no seeing past the similarities between BioWare's upcoming new IP Anthem and Bungie's Destiny. Both games are shared world shooters where you meet up with a squad of friends or strangers to tackle missions. They both take place in a sci-fi fantasy setting. Their basic premise involve a sectioned off part of humanity fighting to survive against foreign invaders. The core gameplay revolves around upgrading your character through loot and leveling, so on and so forth. Obviously, the two games also share many differences, with each being their own take on the sci-fi fantasy shared world shooter genre that Destiny first established. At the same time, though, it would be naive to deny that the two games do share parallels. Anthem is very clearly EA and BioWare's reply to Bungie's Destiny. And so far, I must say that I like what I'm seeing of BioWare's new game. I don't trust how good it looks quite yet, since I've been fooled by pre-alpha footage before, but it has my interest piqued. However, one similarity that Anthem shares with Destiny that has me really concerned is the notion that the game's launch will mark the beginning of a, quote, 10-year journey. The following information comes from Xbox's E3 2017 livestream show, where EA's executive VP Patrick Soderlund talked a bit about Anthem shortly after its announcement, describing the game with the following statement.
A social game where you and your friends go out on quests and journeys. It's a game that we've been working on for almost 4 years now. Yeah. And it's a game that we see, once we launch it next year, will be the start of, I think, maybe a 10-year journey for us.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's because Bungie said something very similar when they announced Destiny over 4 years ago.
We needed something that challenges and inspires all of us. Something that I think has enough ideas in it that'll last us for the next 10 years.
Fast forward to today, and Destiny's 10-year plan is off to a rocky start due to a combination of a troubled development history and numerous broken promises. So I can't really blame anyone who might have reservations about Anthem taking a similar 10-year approach. Now, I should point out that I have nothing against the idea of a 10-year plan. What concerns me is when developers introduce a brand new franchise with a premature 10-year plan as a priority. It is one thing for a 10-year plan to naturally form after the first game of a new franchise launches to success, but it's another thing to pursue an artificial 10-year plan from the get-go before even launching that initial first game. It's a classic case of counting your chickens before the eggs hatch, wouldn't you say? A lot can happen in 10 years, especially with a new franchise. So to restrict oneself with a predefined 10-year schedule, to be thinking that far ahead before the first game in the new franchise is even released, is simply foolish and results in expectations that are unlikely to be met. It's like planning out which college your children will go to before they're even born. That's nonsense. You should focus on birthing the child first and then worry about their life and what college they go to as you go along. I would also argue that this type of premature planning for a new franchise also tends to change the mentality of a game's development and production to something less than ideal. The focus tends to become less about pouring everything into a singular project to make the best product and more about coming up with ways to extend, drag out, split, and milk an experience. Kind of like how The Hobbit was split into 3 movies when it could have easily been one, resulting in all 3 movies suffering as a result. So what you get instead of a compelling long-term journey is a series that's stretched too thin. I do believe, however, that long-term plans such as these can be properly implemented and achieved. The most important thing, especially starting out with a new franchise, is for developers to forget about a 10-year plan. They need to stop worrying about what the new franchise will look like 10 years from now when the thing isn't even off the ground yet. They need to stop worrying about the kids' college when they're still in mama's belly. They should instead be focusing on making a singular great product in the present, treating it like it's their last. Once that first game, that foundation, is solidly built, Then they can start carving out a naturally evolving long-term plan. A great example of everything that I'm talking about here is Hollywood and their cinematic universes. These long-term multi-film endeavors that span across many years. Not too dissimilar from Destiny's multi-game 10-year plan or Anthem's potential multi-game 10-year journey. Now, as I'm sure most of you are aware, the most successful of these Hollywood cinematic universes is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka the MCU. And this was a success that wasn't attained by simply rushing into a long-term plan. It all began with a humble little movie called Iron Man, the first movie in the MCU. This was a movie that many writers underestimated and passed on during its pre-production due to how obscure this Iron Man superhero was at the time compared to others. But eventually they managed to put a team together, the film went into production, and when it finally released on May 2008, it became a worldwide phenomenon that spawned the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it today. Now, what is absolutely pivotal to understand is that Marvel didn't go into Iron Man thinking of a 10-year plan or a cinematic universe. While Iron Man's end credits scene foreshadowing the Avengers obviously hinted that they were looking into a long-term plan, it's not like they already had everything mapped out from the outset. Iron Man was Marvel testing the waters with this idea and determining potential success. At the end of the day, with Iron Man, it was just about making a good superhero movie. They focused all their efforts into making this humble little project the best it could be. And I think this singular focus was a big part of why Iron Man ended up being such a tight, well-made movie. That's what really mattered. The fact that it was a good movie is what propelled Iron Man to success, thereby laying the foundation of organically evolving long-term plans like the MCU. And that's how you do it. You don't start by immediately planning a 10-year venture. You begin by focusing on just making something pure and good. You begin by focusing on birthing, nurturing, and caring for the baby and watching them grow before worrying about their college plans. Now, on the other end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe spectrum is the Ghostbusters Cinematic Universe. You remember that? The goal was to start with the all-female leads Ghostbusters movie, then make an all-males leads Ghostbusters movie, and then keep making Ghostbusters movies with different Ghostbusters teams before bringing them together in an Avengers-style grand Ghostbusters epic bonanza. And these were all plans that they had in mind before that first movie even released. Without even gauging audience interest, without laying a solid foundation like Marvel did with Iron Man, they were already thinking about long-term plans to drag the series out. Thus, the focus became less about making good movies and more about franchising a brand. The results, they ended up producing a mediocre movie that performed poorly at the box office, ending all hopes and sequels for a cinematic universe. By worrying about the child's future instead of caring for them in the present, they kind of set their child up for failure. Now, sitting between Marvel's success and Ghostbusters' failure is the DC Cinematic Universe, which is yet another case of rushing in with a long-term plan rather than starting with a solid short-term foundation. You can clearly see the difference between the Dark Knight trilogy, where the focus was making 3 good Batman movies, and the more recent Batman v Superman movie, where the agenda was to quickly propel the DC brand into a cinematic universe status. It was about taking a shortcut rather than taking the proper methodical route. As a result, their endeavors on the cinematic universe front hasn't been nearly as successful as Marvel's, both critically and financially. All because they prioritized the future before the present. They prioritized franchising over making a quality product. So, with all this in mind, my point with all of this is that it's concerning to think that Anthem's early commitment to a 10-year journey may signify that they're taking the Ghostbusters or DC route with their franchise rather than the Marvel approach. I fear that Anthem might be getting ahead of itself like Destiny did by already thinking about a long-term cinematic universe, or interactive universe, I should call it, before they've even launched that first game, before they've even given birth to their child, before they have nurtured and cared for the child. My concern is that they're pushing for an artificial, premature 10-year-long journey rather than one that develops naturally from a solid foundation. Again, I'm not against the idea of a 10-year plan. I'm not against those who explore that option as a possibility early on, like Marvel did with Iron Man's end credit scene, as long as they know that long-term plans aren't things you can rush into from the outset, and that the present is just as important. That's what Anthem needs to understand. The words 10-year journey should be nowhere near this game when it hasn't even launched yet, when they don't even know what our reactions to it will be when we finally get our hands on it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Anthem ends up being the Iron Man that propels the franchise to a successful interactive universe rather than a Ghostbusters or Batman v Superman that underwhelms. They need to forget about this 10-year thing for now and focus on the present, on pouring everything they have into that initial release. Focus on your child's birth and childhood. They need to treat this game like it's their last one. Leave no stone unturned, no feature missing under premature reassurances of long-term sequels. Make a great game, gauge audience reaction, listen and learn. Then maybe start thinking about what the franchise could look like 10 years from now. Anthem is still an infant. It's this fresh new thing. It is a blank slate. There is still time for it to be the Iron Man that plants the seed for an amazing long-term future. But if EA gets greedy and pulls a Ghostbusters, if they start counting their chickens before the eggs hatch, I fear this might spell trouble. Anyway, that's my take on Anthem and its potential 10-year journey. Thank you for tuning in. Now, these are just my own insights and opinions. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share about the matter, let us know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoy my content, I hope you'll consider supporting me on Patreon to help our community remain independent from third-party sponsorship and corporate interference. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!